Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Nigerian environmental NGO HEDA files a lawsuit against Shell to try and stop them selling its license to a local operator. It's accused of having caused more than 35% of oil spills in Nigeria, and campaigners say they've set the deal up to avoid taking responsibility. Also, say my name. Ivory Coast centres its own history and people as it shakes up the naming system for its streets and landmarks. Colonial references are out. The nation's journey directs the new designations. And Guinea's Leppy fabric is recognised by the continent's intellectual property organisation for its huge contribution to national identity. And a label is given that should guarantee quality for buyers and also protect Leppy from growing incidents of counterfeiting. But first, Nigerian human rights and environmental NGOs filed a lawsuit in the Lagos High Court to try and stop Shell from selling its Nigerian holdings to a local oil and gas outfit. HEDA reckons Shell is responsible for 35% of oil spills in Nigeria and accuses the oil multinational of structuring the $2.4 billion deal to try and sidestep responsibility for its long history of pollution. Samuel Okoye talks us through.
One of the grounds raised against the decision of the oil company Shell to transfer its mining license to a Nigerian consortium is that the company did not follow legal requirements that require it to conduct and disclose an environmental evaluation study. The civil society group, HEDA Resource Center, says the welfare of local communities where Shell operated will be compromised if the company leaves Nigeria without addressing the environmental issues associated with its operations. Shell has operated in Nigeria for about 70 years. Local communities say they have suffered serious environmental degradation from the company's operations, with vast expanse of their farmlands and fishing grounds rendered unsuitable for economic activities. The court case is part of the growing opposition to the plans by Shell and other large Western oil companies like ExxonMobil and Total Energies to sell their operations to on the Nigerian mainland to local companies. The Western companies want to concentrate their operations offshore, where they say they will be free from the challenges of operating in local communities. The communities are angry that the Western companies are leaving their environment worse than they met it. Many doubt if the Nigerian companies taking over from the Western companies will be willing to compensate the communities for the huge environmental damage the oil companies want to leave behind.
Samuel Okoye there for us in Lagos. Now, a look now at some news in brief. Congolese officials say that the government and M23 rebels plan on holding their first direct peace talks in Doha on April 9th. The insurgents have captured key cities in the east of DRC since launching a huge offensive in late January in which thousands have died. Rwanda backs the M23 and its president Paul Kagame met his Congolese counterpart Felix Tshisekedi in Qatar in mid-March for a surprise meeting. But Kinshasa is yet to sit down with the M23 for face-to-face negotiations about the crisis. South Africa's coalition government's deadlocked over budget negotiations ahead of a parliamentary vote on Wednesday. The fiscal plans passed a first hurdle last month when tabled by Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana. But the ANC, the biggest party in the alliance, does not have the numbers to pass the budget alone. And the next biggest bloc, the DA, is not on side. It's against plans to raise VAT, and without a compromise and parliamentary approval, the standoff persists and it's back to the drawing board for Godongwana. And 98 people were arrested in Zimbabwe on Tuesday for taking part in anti-government demonstrations. Turnout to Monday's rallies was muted, but cities were shuttered both as a stay-away protest and a precaution by Zimbabweans worried that trouble might have kicked off. There's been deepening discontent within the ruling ZANU-PF party amidst allegations of creeping authoritarianism by President Emerson Mnangagwa. Well, Ghana is ramping up how to keep track of its gold. It's bringing in blockchain technology to make it harder to illegally export the precious metal and is banning individuals from buying or selling it. The country's thought to lose about $2 billion every year from gold smuggled out past its borders. Our Justice Baidu tells us more.
The trade in gold in Ghana has always been open to everyone, as this country produces so much of the mineral. So much so that once upon a time, this country was known as the Gold Coast. Well, not any longer after this law gets accented to by new President John Dramani Mahama. The government would now take full control over the buying and selling of gold, monopolizing it as it already does with the trade of cocoa, another heavy income earner for the West African country.
Over the years, the Republic has not benefited as much as we should. Ghana will be able to accrue up to $12 billion worth of foreign exchange for the central bank to be able to build the needed foreign exchange reserves to cover the necessary import.
This new law, which also sets up a new gold board, seems to have received some level of acceptance across the board in Ghana. It has, however, received a level of criticism as being a big gamble for a country that relies on gold heavily for much of its finances.
What you are hoping to do is to attract $250 million every week to buy gold. There's a question. Does this economy have the capacity to mint the cedi equivalent of $250 million every week without contributing to inflation?
Gold is a major backbone of the Ghanaian economy, fetching over $11 billion for the country in 2023 alone.
Justice Baidu there in Accra for us. Now, Ivory Coast is trying to get its own image in the centre of the names of the streets and roads that its citizens navigate along. It's launched a nationwide project to specify the addresses of households and businesses. And it's not just to simplify directions, but also to remove colonial links to street names. Our team reports.
It's the most important avenue in the country, so its renaming is symbolic to modern Ivory Coast. Boulevard Valéry Giscard d'Estaing becomes Boulevard Houphouët-Boigny.
It's an act of remembrance, an act of recognition for the great man who left his mark on the history of Ivory Coast. It allows us to enter another era of Ivory Coast.
They're going to replace the names of white people with the names of the Ivorians. Now if it carries the Kofi, the Kwame, the Félix Houphouët-Boigny, it makes me very happy.
I can't be sure it's such a good thing, because every time we change names, we lose our history.
No longer will roads be called Boulevard de France or Boulevard de Marseille. From now on, all of these will bear Ivorian names. 14,000 roads have been renamed, and the majority of which had no toponyms, meaning they weren't named after their surroundings.
One of the recommendations concerning toponyms was that this project should contribute to national cohesion and reconciliation. All of our authorities who've administered and governed our territories in the past have been included in this project.
A project the government is rolling out across the whole country, like here in Yamoussoukro.
We'll take the entrance to each house and we'll take shops which are long-lasting. If the building isn't going to last, we won't take it.
A painstaking task for the team that has to map out the entire city.
Each house will have a number and the street will have a name. What's the point? It's to make it easier for the GPS to locate you.
That's good, that's good.
The authorities also hope the project will improve the flow of emergency services and tax collection.
Well, in Guinea, Leppy fabric's been recognised by the African Intellectual Property Organisation for its huge contribution to national identity. The label should guarantee both quality and protect it against counterfeiting. Our team sent us this report.
Winding is the first stage, which consists of moving from the wire to the spools.
In this workshop in Koya, the ancestral art of Leppy is being kept alive. 50 kilometers from Guinea's capital, Conakry, threads are carefully selected before they are woven using traditional techniques. From winding to weaving to dyeing with indigo, Aliou follows a meticulous process taught to him by his mother.
After a few hours in the sun, our fabric dries. Here's our cowrie pattern in a black dye.
Each piece of cloth is 1.2 meters wide, handmade with fine cotton thread and streaked in black or indigo, before being passed on to vendors for sale. The authenticity of the Leppy comes now with a special guarantee called a protected geographical indication, meaning Aliou's work complies with specific standards.
It highlights the work done by our dyers, weavers, and other craftsmen. So the Leppy label helps to boost sales, because in a way it protects ancestral know-how.
In recent years, counterfeit versions of the famous fabric have flooded the market, creating unfair competition for local craftsmen. Authorities say the protected designation will help combat this.
We have the opportunity to combat counterfeiting, and this is one of the complaints made by women's groups. They're facing Chinese competition on the market with counterfeit fabrics.
Guinea wants to go even further in officially recognizing Leppy's value by adding it to UNESCO's list of intangible cultural heritage.
Yet another thing I need to get into my life. That, though, is all we have time for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us, though, and do so again if you can. Till then, take care.